All right, we've finally come to what is my number one best read, most impactful read of all time. It's a book that if I could only choose one out of any ever written in history, I would take with me forever to read over and over again. And it's called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life by a guy called Stephen Hayes. Stephen Hayes is a clinical psychologist who practices something called acceptance and commitment therapy. It's basically a therapy heavily influenced by principles from Eastern philosophy. And I'll explain what the therapy basically is, and then I'll explain a few impactful points from the book that really left a mark on me. So acceptance and commitment therapy is heavily based upon a lot of mindfulness practices, but heavily focused on basically accepting a lot of the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that we all inevitably feel that come and go, ultimately accepting them rather than trying to fight them and force them away. And then the commitment part of that is basically committing to not only accepting your thoughts and emotions and moods and states of mind, but committing to living a life of value and meaning and purpose. Because society wants to gaslight you into thinking that, number one, your thoughts, so anxiety, depression, or whatever crazy, dark, twisted thoughts, moods, states of minds that you're in, are number one, not normal, and number two, they want to gaslight you into thinking that no one else experiences this, and it's complete bullshit according to the clinical literature. Significant amounts of people will go through periods of anxiety, depression. He even says in the book, if I recall this correctly, up to 50% of the population sometime in their life will experience at least some degree of suicidal thoughts. Now, obviously the disclaimer is, if this is severe and ongoing, obviously go and seek help, but know that if this is only temporary, from time to time you have a weird thought where you think something like that along those lines, it can help reassure you that that's a lot more normal than you really think, as is something like anxiety, stress, depression. So that fact alone in the book makes you feel a little bit more relieved and take some pressure off yourself to know, all right, I'm not fucking insane. Everybody goes through periods of darkness, of stress, of struggle, of coping. And that's okay. That's all part of the human experience. So the acceptance part of the book, which is obviously a core part, is, like I mentioned before, when you inevitably go through periods of struggle or suffering, rather than try to fight the emotions that come about, or the feelings, or the moods, or the weird states of mind that come about, rather than fight them, sit with them, be mindful of them, observe them, and ultimately accept them. Accept that they're there, they're not gonna go anywhere for the time being. Well, you can't force them away, rather. But as said in Eastern philosophy, this too shall pass. It will pass. This anxious state of mind, this anxiety, this depression, this anger, what have you, this suffering will pass. Because why he stresses that this is an important practice is when you inevitably go through negative states of mind, you have no control over them coming or going, like to a certain degree. So when they inevitably are there, your best, most practical, pragmatic course of action is to just sit with them and accept them, because they're not going anywhere. Because what happens is, when we feel something like anxiety, we will feel secondary emotions like more anxiety for feeling anxiety, or maybe we will feel anger or frustration that we're not in a happy mood, or we'll feel angry that we're fucking angry. So basically, by accepting these emotions, you don't go down any rabbit holes of adding any unnecessary secondary emotions that are only going to further deepen and make your suffering worse. So that's the acceptance part of the equation. The commitment part of the equation is basically, and it gets very existential and philosophical, inevitably when you're going to go through this suffering, it's helpful to do this exercise which he recommends, which I have, which was honestly life-changing, and that is to sit down and literally write out the things that you value the most. What is the life that you want to live? What are the things that you value the most? Literally write them out, and then start working on a plan and reverse engineer how you can achieve those. So if that's wanting to get in shape, that's valuing family and friends, or travel, or monetary success, business success, love, friendship, relationships. Write them out, what you want to achieve, and then meticulously plan out how you're going to achieve that, and literally write that into your calendar down to the hour, down to the 15-minute increment. So this part of commitment is committing to planning out and executing a life that you value. And how it ties in with the acceptance part is when you have this plan of your life, of what you value, and then going off and living it, obviously you're going to go through periods of suffering, of mental torment, of anxiety, depression, what have you, regardless. So it's important to have a game plan for your life, if you will, that you can fall back on, and regardless of what you are thinking or feeling or believing, you execute on that. You focus on executing on a life that you value. So those two practices alone, even if you just went and did that tomorrow, it could be life-changing for you. Some more points in the book that I like. He talks a lot about mindfulness, which is obviously a big part of Eastern philosophy. And he talks about being mindful of your thoughts and your feelings, but particularly whatever thoughts are going on in your mind. And rather than trying to cling to them like positive emotions or pushing negative emotions, just be mindful of them. Don't attach to them. The more that you attach to them, the more you're going to add secondary emotions like anger, frustration, sadness, depression, what have you, and only make your suffering worse. So he uses this cool analogy of a bridge and looking down to a railway of multiple trains and imagining all of the different trains going by, and using that metaphor as the trains are your thoughts and you are the observer on top of the bridge looking down, just looking at the trains passing, just observing and watching as your thoughts are passing by without attaching to them, without adding any secondary emotion or unnecessary suffering. Anyway, it's a deep book. There's much more to it than that. If you were to go and listen to any one of these book recommendations and read one book, this would be it. I can't tell you how much it's changed my life. I can't tell you how impactful it is. It's one of the books that really rubbed off on me, where I've carried it through my life, and it really has helped me to deal with the suffering of life. But more importantly, focus on what it means to live a valuable life, and committing to executing on that. So anyways, highly recommend checking it out. Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life by Stephen Hayes. Might just be a life-changing one for yourself as well. All right.